Today, we're diving deep into the future of business operations with Hayden, a serial entrepreneur who's using AI not just as a tool, but as a core operating system for building, scaling, and protecting his companies. You'll learn how the master prompt method is changing the rules, turning AI from a flashy assistant into a strategic partner that drives real exponential growth. If you're serious about surviving and thriving in the AI first era that we're entering, you're going to want to watch this all the way through. And if you stay till the end, we'll teach you how to build your master prompt step by step. Let's get into it. Welcome to the channel, Hayden.
Thanks for having me, Tiago.
How are you spending your time these days when it comes to AI?
Yeah, I work pretty long days. Typically wake up around 4:30 and spend the first 5 hours or so of the day just learning and typically playing with AI. I have several businesses, so typically over the last decade, I've probably spent 40 hours a week or so learning something, tinkering with it, and if it works, attempting to systematize it and then teach it to all my leadership teams.
So when you say leadership teams, plural, what are the different kinds of businesses that you're involved in right now and how?
So I have 3 different holding companies, and between those holding companies, we've got probably like 30 active businesses. I'd say 2/3 of those were acquired, 1/3 of those were started. Each of those businesses has a CEO, each of the holding companies has a CEO, and the businesses run a really wide gamut. So we've got one holding company that's really a lot of brick and mortar, so HVAC, plumbing, roofing. We've got another holding company that's a lot of digital stuff.
When you think of what's going on with AI right now, your time, I think it's safe to say, is limited and in demand. What makes AI worth spending, like you said, 4 or 5+ hours per day, learning, experimenting with, and figuring out?
I firmly believe that AI can potentially double to triple every single one of my companies per year. That's how big I think it is. Typically, leadership teams up until now have been setting goals to have like 30 to 50% year-over-year growth, right? That's being considered sustainable growth. And I think some of the scalable companies that I mentioned, I think you can 10x that today with AI. I mean, it takes a lot of work, don't get me wrong. And I think some of the less scalable ones, so more of the brick and mortar where a lot of the fulfillment is done in person, I still think, instead of 30 to 50% a year, I think probably 6 to 100% growth per year is doable.
Say a little bit about Acquire and Empower, which are 2 of your companies.
Acquire as a business that helps people basically become acquisition entrepreneurs, typically buying $1 million a year cash flowing business that's in profit, financing them through SBA loans. And then Empower is working more on the seller side. So we're helping doing exit planning for sellers and kind of connecting the 2.
And how many people have you worked with, or across how many businesses or acquisitions have you worked on?
A bunch. Definitely over 100. I think we had like 6 closes last quarter. And we probably had started working with another 50 people. And on the seller side, we probably talked to thousands of sellers off market.
When you say the valuation drivers, which of those valuation drivers does AI affect?
All of them.
All of them?
Every single one. Yeah, every single one. Different ones, I would say, have... So how I said you can get like 3 to 5x growth in some areas and maybe 2x growth in others. So I think marketing, for example, you can have massive growth. Sales today, on the actual sales side, AI can help a lot with things like call reviews, pipeline management, autoresponders. It can make probably a manager maybe 3 times more effective, right? So a sales manager might have 25 to 30 reports. It can remove a lot of the reporting, a lot of the bullshit that people don't like doing, but it can't currently take calls, right? So you're still limited by someone actually taking the calls. Now that might change in the next year or 2. Operations, things like creating process, things like all of that is so much faster. It removes a lot of the monotony, but there's still a level of training and buy-in that takes a lot of work.
So what is the master prompt method?
So basically, when you prompt, you want to be able to give the AI as much detailed instruction and context as possible. If you do a simple one-sentence prompt and you've got no other context, the answer you're going to get is going to be no better than really a Google answer in most cases. And so some people do start that way, and they prefer to turn it into a conversation, right? So do this for me, and then it gets back. Okay, now make it this way. Okay, and now make it this way. So they kind of look at like it's a Google on chatbot, right? And then, so that's kind of your first introductory level. And the second level up after that would be, you've probably all seen like an Instagram reel where someone says like, copy this prompt, and it's a super long thing, right?
Yeah.
And you are my executive coach, and you won't take any shit from me. And it's like, then it becomes super mean. And so we've all seen that. What the master prompt was basically, how can I give full context for, in my case, for my business, every single time I prompt without having to write anything.
Yeah.
And I first thought of this when like ChatGPT first came out with memories, right? The way memories worked was it was just, one at a time. You had to ask it to remember it, right? And eventually, after you used it a lot, it became really, really useful. But just the way it worked, it probably took like, hundreds of conversations to get to that point. And I found myself always saying, remember this, remember this, remember this, right? And then I started playing with other tools, and I found that Claude basically had these account preferences that let you put in effectively like all of the memories. So I actually had ChatGPT export all of its memories and put it into Claude, and then it uses that and accesses that every time I ask it anything, right? So it now has the full context of my business. And so I worked on developing that out for each of my companies, and then sharing it with my leadership teams and showing them how to use it. And this one prompt would maybe be like on a Google Doc, 30 pages long, right? And those 30 pages are being accessed every single time you type something in. So once you do that, it's just night and day the type of response you get, and you just continually iterate, and it just gets better and better.
One more question before we look at a couple different kind of case studies. What is the impact that it has? Like, why is it important? Why does it matter? What difference does it make to have a master prompt?
You get more done better and faster. The quality of your work improves drastically. Like there's some stats around quality improving 40%. The productivity, the amount of work one person does, improves drastically, and you can get it out faster. So literally, it's all three, right?
And that all comes from more and better context.
More and better context, and the fact that it's AI. What would take, someone in 2 weeks to put together everything you need to really do a thorough job of something now takes under an hour. And so what I find really interesting is, and what will happen, is that there will be a democratization of execution. So, and it's going to take a different amount of time depending on what industry you're in and how adaptable the industry is. So like the brick and mortar stuff will probably take several years. But some of the digital stuff, software, marketing, legal, finance, that stuff will probably move much faster. Because of this, you can do very thorough things that typically only very large companies have the resources to do in very little time.
So sort of narrowing the difference or the gap between the small companies and the large companies.
Yeah, democratization of execution.
Let's get into both some real life demos, and then we're going to actually teach you how to build the first version of your master prompt for you and your company or organization. So watch till the end. All right, so now we've moved to the computer and we are looking now at your Claude account. Say a little bit about why you have chosen to use Claude for this.
I use Claude because it has this basically setting preference that lets you basically put in this, it's called personal preferences, that lets you put in everything about your company. So this goes into every single prompt. And then the other reason I use Claude is that it also has projects. And these projects, for example, when you go in, it has sources, right? And so these sources over here also have project knowledge. And I can share these projects with other people. Whenever I make a prompt from within this project, it uses not only what's in the settings, but it also uses everything that's within this project knowledge. and if I can share this project with other people. So the Notebook LM, it's kind of like this is like Notebook LM with a separate notebook for everyone. What Notebook LM doesn't have is this sort of preferences thing. And
that's your master prompt, basically. Could we see that again real quick?
Sure.
Just to give people a little preview. So this is that, you said 20 or 30 page doc that has all the context about this particular business.
Yep. So I share this with everyone on the team, and I always ask them to just update this part, right? So obviously this is me, and this is my position. I'm the founder, also some personal stuff, right? Shows what my strengths are, also shows what my weaknesses are, and I also have a how I want AI to help me. I hope to be able to use AI and technology to fill in for the weakness, which is driving accountability, keeping everything on schedule, internal communication, not doing things that I don't like doing. These are the key focus areas. Again, this is for Acquira and Empower together in one. It's not, we have separate ones for different businesses. Then we have like business structure stuff, which I don't often use. We have sort of what our products are.
It's like a compendium of knowledge about this business.
Yeah, so you know what I used to use and was we had what was a big Google Doc that I just called our executive library. And I just put everything in there. Now this is kind of the same, but it's also in AI. So yeah, so it shows our sales funnel and our conversion metrics, our sales process, our timing of closes, our qualification, our workshops. This is all stuff on our team, who's on the team, what's the cost of each team.
And this is what we're going to show people in a minute to create for themselves, at least the first version.
Exactly, yeah. And some of the pieces that matter at the end are sort of more like, so we're going to show how to do this. But so for example, 131 is something I've used in all of my businesses. Whenever I ask for 131, I'm asking you to help with decision-making framework in which you determine the problem, the outcome, and provide 3 potential paths and 1 recommended course of action. And then I always ask it to ask 5 questions one at a time to get what you need to do this, and answer each question based on what you know about the business and situation. Present your answer and allow me to edit it or approve it before you proceed to the next question.
It's not just literal factual information about the business like you would find in a business directory. It's like frameworks that you use.
Yep. So all of these are like, we're going to show what this actually creates, this AI hiring one. So this is one prompt. AI CMO, we can show that as well. AI SOP, we can show that as well.
They're sort of like almost like mini programs that you run.
Exactly.
Protocols.
Yeah, they're like little protocols. And like the nice thing about LLMs is that they are, you multimodal. So you can take a screenshot and put it in. You can, take all sorts of stuff and put it in.
So a project you mentioned is really just a conversational interface to a set of documents.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. So it's almost like it's adding to the master prompt, but just for those things. So in this project, for example, this is all related to the seller funnel and us working with sellers and not working with buyers. So there's no reason for me to put this in the master prompt that all people on the buyer side of the business will use.
It might even get confusing and pull the wrong info.
Exactly.
So it's almost like you want this global context, but then you actually want silos.
Yep.
You want little enclaves of protected information that aren't shared universally.
Yep.
And how about the shareability? You mentioned if you have someone working with you on one of these projects, you can share it with them.
Yep. You can share chats and you can share projects.
And if you share a project, can they have their own conversation with that project?
Yep.
And do you have access to that conversation, or it's private to them?
I believe I do. I don't really use it like that very often.
And ChatGPT, just as a point of comparison, at least on the day we're recording this, you can create a project, but you can't share that project with anyone, right?
Yeah, when I first looked into ChatGPT for these options, there was a bunch of different things that it couldn't do. The master prompt is another one. ChatGPT can't do it. Gemini has gems, and they just don't work properly, at least right now, as of April 29th at 4:46 p.m. And the only 2 that are kind of options for this are Notebook LM and Claude. I find that Claude is just a little bit better for just general shareability than Notebook LM.
All right, so this was a good introduction to how you use Claude. Let's look at a couple use cases. So what are some examples of problems you were trying to solve or things you were trying to build that were either way faster or way more effective or profitable or whatever it is because of the master prompt method in AI?
AI, like I said, can democratize execution, meaning even small enterprises, even a 1-person company can now take on a process that would be typically reserved for a company the size of GM, right? And so one hiring practice that we use in our companies is top grading. And top grading is a lot of work. You have to, obviously the cliche of, hiring slow and firing fast definitely exists, but you put in a ton of effort. You have way more interviews. And then you also measure much more regularly. Do you want to do this without the master prompt first, or I can if you like?
Sure.
Yeah. So yeah, this has no personal preferences, just kind of a blank account. So let's say I just want to say I want to hire a marketing director or acquire help. So you can see
Interesting.
I have to go back. It's like, all right, well, give me context, right? What does acquire do? What are the key responsibilities? What are the specific qualifications or experience you're looking for? So it's basically kind of like, if I have to type all this out, I'm basically, someone's just typing for me,
Right.
right? Or, adding some words in. Okay, so if I go to my version here, I just say do AI hiring for marketing director.
And AI hiring is like a trigger word that activates that protocol.
Yeah, so that's one of the words I had in my master.
And when you say Acquira, that one word, it knows everything about Acquira.
Yeah. So first it's asking me questions, because this is what I have it programmed to do, and it answers its own question. So what are the primary responsibilities of this market? By the way, we don't have a marketing director at Acquira. So it's interesting that it kind of understands this. So leading overall marketing strategy, generate leads for both of our programs. Managing our multi-channel marketing approach, it knows it's emails, AI agent texting, and paid ads. Overseeing content creation for nurturing our list, directing both buyer side and seller side marketing efforts, managing marketing team that includes blah, blah, blah. So, this is perfect. So I'll just say yes. Yeah. All right. All right. So now it's just going to create a job description. This is the other thing I really like about Claude is that it has these things called artifacts. And you'll see it'll create multiple in a second. But notice how over here, it's doing exactly what I mentioned. So it's got the responsibility, it's got the metric to measure, and it's got our quarterly target for each one of these. And again, we don't actually have this position, so it's making some assumptions here. It's got the A player versus B player performance across all of these. It's got the month 1 outcomes, the month 2 outcomes, the month 3 and beyond outcomes. It's got what the ideal background.
When you've done this in the past, you've gone through this in great detail and really verified it, right?
Yep. We can go through it. Typically, the things that I will always look at will be like specifically this, and like the targets, make sure they're accurate. This would have taken our HR director a bunch of time to create.
Like how much time would you estimate?
So each of these is creating a lot of artifacts right now. So this is probably the hardest one. This would probably take the better part of a week, simply because you have to have meetings with, in this case, whoever the direct report or the direct manager would be, which would probably be like the CEO, right? Because we don't have like a VP layer. That's multiple meetings and multiple reviews, and then also just at least a couple days of work putting it together. So okay, that's one thing. This is right here is the recruitment materials. So it creates, again, this is part of the prompt in AI hiring. It creates a screening interview criteria. So obviously we're going to put out job ads, and we don't want to have to interview every single person. So it asks for a cover letter. It defines what should be in that cover letter, and it based on it being able to screen and score, so that when we actually do interviews, we only do it with people above 20 out of 30 to advance. And so here are some of the sample questions. Here's if we email to our list about the role. Here is a job posting for external sites. And then here is if people pass that screening interview, here's what the working interviews would be. So in a position like this, we probably have a couple working interviews with a couple people. So we'd have one here, this is just what it's recommending. Marketing funnel optimization. Another is email marketing revitalization. A third is new product launch marketing plan. It also gives, we always do homework for managers or above. And so basically giving us a couple options for homework to give them. This always took me a ton of time to think about like good homework for a role, and they're always really good. And then again, this is like top grading would do all of these things. Most people in a company of like 30 to 40 people like Acquira, you wouldn't do this. You'd just be like, Yep.
Yeah.
Looks like you can type on a keyboard.
I mean,
Give him a chance.
yeah, it's like
Yeah.
for a company already, like a massive multinational already doing top grading,
Yeah.
this is like, okay, more efficiency, faster time. But for, I mean, I'm thinking of my company, which is even much smaller, 5 people. We would simply not do anything like this. We would be like, oh, we know a guy who does this so-and-so, and just invite him on.
And like, what's the difference? So the difference might be that, let's say 50% more people in this method are A players, right? Than in your method. So you take two identical companies going at the same motion, you maybe need to make, if you're growing, maybe year 1 you make 3 hires. Maybe 1 of yours works out and 2 of mine work out.
That's
right?
huge.
But that's huge. And now next year, because 2 of mine work out, I need to make 6 hires and you need to make 3 hires.
Yeah.
And now 4 of mine work out and 1 of yours, like that just...
It's a divergence.
Yeah, it's huge. Because companies really, it is about people.
Yeah.
Right? Nowadays, because you can do this, like this, in my opinion, will become commonplace. Again, it'll depend on the industry and how much people use AI. It'll probably take many years before every small business is doing it, but there's no reason, in my opinion, why people shouldn't do this right now. Like everybody watching this video should do this.
This was an awesome example. Let's look at a different one. Sure. Let's look at kind of the opposite, like something operations related.
In all of my companies, another thing that is, I'd say we do at a smaller size than most companies, because I think it's really important to get consistency across the board, is fulfillment engines. But they're basically flowcharts of process. And so this is a process that we use and in one of our products, basically to, someone pays money, they get onboarded, and we start searching for a business for them. And it kind of starts here at us receiving money, and it ends, this part ends at getting an LOI.
A letter of intent.
A letter of intent countersigned by a seller, right? And so there's kind of two paths to it. There's on market and off market. We do both at the same time. Effectively, like, this is a good onboarding tool for people, and it's also just good. It's a good tool for your onboarding of customers as well as your employees. And then it's also like each of these actually links to process, right? And SOPs and checklists, right? And I think everyone knows they should do this.
Yeah.
But it's a pain in the ass. You have to be like a certain kind of weird to enjoy it, which I'm not. And my daughter is, though. She loves it. But check this out. So I'm just going to take a screenshot. Make a chat here. And just to test this out, I'm going to say, what is this? I think paste in the screenshot. Okay, it says this appears to be a process flow diagram for the A+ program, onboarding and deal sourcing workflow. It's describing it to me accurately. So I'm just going to say, do AI SOP for every step.
Which is another protocol.
Yeah, another protocol that we define in the master prompt. This one is like 2 paragraphs, right? Which starts with, whenever I say AOSOP. And so what it's now doing is it's taking every single step here, and it's basically creating the SOP for it. Now you can go even further, and you can actually have, if you have Claude make this flowchart for you, and then have it do it. I personally prefer, when we're teaching companies, I personally prefer to actually do this manually, just so people really think about it, because I think that piece does require some brain power.
What's the impact of being able to document a process like this? What difference does it make?
Accountability. It's probably the biggest difference.
Accountability for
employees
to follow the process.
To follow the process, yeah. There's never, if something doesn't get done, there's only a few reasons why that happens, right? Either they didn't know it needed to be done, they didn't know how to do it, or they weren't bought in to do it, right? And so this completely eliminates the first 2, right? You know it needs to be done, and you know how to do it with this. And on the buy-in, it helps a lot. It's much easier to understand what you're helping achieve and what your role is in it.
Yeah.
And so actually, we have these things called clarity boards. So if you go back to like this other one that I did here, right? By the way, I always have at least 3 chats going on at once while I wait for AI.
Yeah.
So in this one right here, like, what we do is we have like a clarity board, which has all of these on separate It's like a one-stop shop for employees. And it also has the fulfillment engine for that employee just what they need to do, right?
It's almost like an employee handbook or a manual in a way.
That's also included. The actual employee handbook's included in it as well.
Do you ever find that the people in your companies following this, do they ever ask the AI for help if they get stuck on one of the steps or somewhere in the process?
They absolutely can. I just want to like stress that each one, this is just, it's a pain to do. They're very accurate. Like they're actually, when I reviewed these, they were more accurate than the first reviews I did when they were actually made. Because for Acquira, we made these maybe a year ago, a little under a year ago. And it took months to do. And it was a lot of work for a lot of people, right? Because, and then you have someone who has to own the SOP. This right here was probably the replacement of at least 3 months of work. Now there's still part of the challenge now is like, how do you get buy-in? Because sometimes when someone has spent months working on it, like they just need to get buy-in because it was so much work. And now sometimes you can see that people care a little bit less because the effort wasn't there.
SOPs and documentation is so interesting because it's important for companies of all sizes. Like I can imagine a massive corporation needing to do that, but also in our tiny team of 5, the only way we can run our company with so few people is with really good documentation. It's like every person in our team on our team has 5 hats that they wear, and they to switch between those roles, they need notes and documentation. So the solution you showed is one that encompasses a super wide variety of companies and organizations.
Yep. And it's just one example, right? This, if you recall in my preference when I said what my weaknesses were, it was exactly this. And I said, I want AI to help me with this. And so that's how I use it. But I think as people use it, they're going to find even more use cases, again, just with an LLM, going back and forth. And the thing that I really encourage is so it's a couple things. When you're using Claude, I always encourage you to ask Claude to ask you questions. And then if you have a master prompt, I always encourage like answer your own question based on what you know and then stop and let me look at it just to save you time. So you don't actually have to type anything. And then you also are able to see what does Claude not actually understand correctly, right? And then you can go back and change the master prompt.
Interesting.
Right? So that's part of the iterative process.
Say a little bit about how this is impacting the structure of teams or the size of teams or the roles on those teams.
I think there will be no director layer at all. And I think the manager layer will probably expand. So typically you kind of had like a 50-person company would have sort of 7 sort of front-facing technicians, right? For every manager. And so you'd have 7 people to 7 managers to let's call it 1 CEO. And so that's a 50-person structure. And when you think about that, like from a headcount ratio perspective, it's not bad, right? You've got effectively 42 people being paid that are revenue generating, and you have 8 people that are supporting. However, getting to that stage is a ton of work. And so there's this stage some people call it the valley of death, some people call it the swamp, right? And it's the stage where you're still too small to be able to afford to like hire that layer of management. And so the only real way to overcome it is you either take a risk and do a hire with all your profit and stop paying yourself, or you work way more hours, or you do both. And so to get to that 50 of efficiency, most of the companies that we're buying actually have about 25, 30 employees, and it becomes super inefficient. So you end up having maybe 12 or 13 sort of front level techs. And then you end up having like 5 managers and like 2 people that wear like 4 hats. And so it ends up being really inefficient. And maybe in your previous company or in your current company, you have something like that where I certainly have. And so what I think will happen is you will just have the front level people, right?
Just the people actually doing the work,
the
making
revenue
the
generating
money.
people. Yeah. And depending on the business, again, plumbers, HVAC, like you need actual people to go to someone's house, right? You need cars. You're limited to the number of hours they have in a day. But what you sell an info product, right? And actually you sell an info product without sales. So actually you could have almost infinite amount of revenue coming in with very, very few employees, right? And so that's why we have two portfolios. One portfolio is like, will not be replaced by technology, but will not scale at like 5x a year. And then we have the other portfolio that's like scale like crazy, but you're going to be competing with other people who are scaling like crazy.
Interesting.
So yeah,
Wow.
long answer to your question. I think you're going to have far larger companies with far fewer employees. AI will be all your director layer, will be your CEO layer. It will just be basically owner and then front level people.
So if you're still watching at this point, you want to do this. You understand the context, you understand the impact, you understand the implications. I really want you to try this for yourself. So we're going to move over to the flip chart and teach you how to come up with at least the V1 of your master prompt. Ready? Let's do it. So I'm going to assume you work in an organization of some kind, like a company. You might be a manager, a director, a VP, a CEO, or even the owner. How would someone working in an organization or company like that get started with the master prompt method?
Yeah, so I would first probably just create a Google Doc, and I'd start creating some sections. And so I think the first section would be personal info. Pardon my writing, I was a doctor in a former life. So outside of your name, this is going to be like, what's your role? What company do you work in? How do you want to use AI? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? That will help AI kind of personalize and give it the context that you need.
Okay.
Next, obviously, we need some company info. So here is like, when was the company established? How many employees does it have? Who, if it's part of the personal, like who do you report to? And then some important questions about like, what markets do they serve? Who is their ideal customer? What products and services do they have? So each of these questions, and we can go over them, but each of these questions, I actually recommend, if you don't know the answer, actually just talk to AI, right? And so if you don't know who they serve perfectly, just literally, type a message like, hey, help me determine who our ideal client profile is.
Totally.
Right? And take their answer, like to put it in a separate artifact, take their answer, copy and paste it in your Google Doc when you're happy with it. So yeah, that's the who, right? There's also like the what, which is like, what do you do, right? What is the outcome that you're effectively trying to give to your customer? And again, you can, if you don't know exactly how to phrase that, it's probably good to actually chat back and forth, use AI as a thought partner. Third is the how, right? So how do you do it? And how is that different from your competitors? So then I would say like market information. Who are your competitors is a good one. What do they do? Especially if you're in marketing, that's super useful.
For each of these sections, is there like a minimal length you would look for? Like a word count, or what level of detail?
Honestly, a paragraph is probably fine. Any level of detail is better than none.
Yeah.
And what you may find is, as you work back and forth with Claude or Notebook LM or whatever, you may decide that based on the results, you may decide, that wasn't perfect. And so I'm going to go and add a little bit more info. So I would actually just recommend everything I talked about, maybe write like 1 to 2 sentences. Outside of market, this is going to be more than 5. We have people or team. Who's on the team, right? If you're the owner of a small business, I would actually just talk about, who reports to you, who reports to each of those people. If you want to bring finance into this and you can make financial decisions, you can put that stuff in. Just keep in mind, if you're going to share this with people on your team, there may be some stuff you don't want to share. I like to put team plus KPIs. So for each person, what is their one number, which is super important. Again, if you don't know, then ask Claude. Hey, this person does this. I need to figure out what would be the best KPI for them. And then products and services. So this, I'll talk about all of the products, including potentially planned products. What do they cost? What are their features? What are the benefits? And like, that's a great start, those 5 things. The last thing that, especially for someone who's a business owner or someone in a leadership position, I would say would be like culture. And this is quite important because culture, which would include
core values, right? It's a, kind of like the who is on the bus, right? Mission, all of that stuff will kind of define everything you do in each of these. And like the AI SOP, for example, our core values require our serve, right? Systematic excellence, which you probably see a lot in what I'm talking about, is the S. And so it knows whenever we say we want to create an SOP, it knows to do that. When we do an email to the list, it knows to do that. When we create content, it knows to mention our core values. And ultimately, that's kind of what creates and positions you in your market. And people who share those values kind of orient towards you and become true fans. So culture is really important. So those things, it's so important. I'm just going to put a little subheader here. So I would say core values. If you don't know them, Claude's really good at helping you identify them. Mission. BHAG is a nice one. It's like your big, hairy, audacious goal, right? And then the final thing, which is maybe outside of the scope of this video, would be the actual kind of prompts, right? And a lot of that can be tailored to your business, right? So the AI SOP, the AI hiring, right? And again, you just figure that out as you keep on going. Maybe you read a book and you really like some concept and you think to yourself, how can I implement this into the master prompt?
Oh, fascinating. Oh, that's such a good, so it's like, sometimes you're reading a book, you're like, I wish I could just like install this book, like a software program into my business. And now you can.
Yeah. Yeah, I played with some stuff too about like, there's like, what would Jesus do, right? Or what would this ex-business person do, right? It's so easy to do with AI, right? Just prompt it because it has all the information about that, right?
What about like goals or strategy? Does that figure into here as well?
For sure. The only reason I wouldn't put this in your first master prompt is as you use AI, any goals and strategy you have today are most likely going to change massively as you kind of explore and realize what AI is capable of. I know for ourselves, we used to plan 3 years in advance. I've gone down to 6 months in advance just because I've noticed that technology shifts just make new things possible. I know at the beginning I was looking at like my 2024 goals that we shared with our leadership team. And it had like the 2-year goals. And so it's like 3-year goals, 2024, 25, 2026. And I was looking at the 2026 number. And today, like in 2025, our 2026 number is like 4 times what it was back then.
Mostly because of AI.
Mostly all because of AI. Like it's only in the last year, the last 6 months really, that changed massively.
Wow. Okay, that's a great piece of advice. Don't put in pre-AI plans that you expect to come to fruition. I'd love if you give this a try. If you could share with us in the comments below what you found. How did it go? What were the wins? What were the obstacles? We'll do our best to respond to those comments and guide you further. But otherwise, thanks for being a guest on the channel and teaching us what you know, Hayden.
I would also love to know in the comments if you are able to use this in something that's not business. What kind of master prompt did you create and like what kind of sections did you put in it? That'd be really interesting to me.
I hope that was interesting. I hope it was valuable. And most of all, I hope it was helpful. You can find out much more about the master prompt method and the new program that we're teaching called Second Brain Enterprise at the link below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.